Chapter 3, Section 2 is estimating by rounding. We're going to start out looking at rounding, and then we'll look at how to make some math problems easier if you just need to get like an approximate or an estimated answer. So first of all, rounding. When you're doing rounding, first pick the place or pick the digit you're going to round to. So which number are you stopping at? And then you look at the next number. If the next number to the right is 4 or lower, then you round down. So basically that means round down. And you don't actually take that digit you're keeping and make it smaller. You just keep that number, keep the digit the same. And because, so say we're rounding to right here, if I take this and make it 43 point, well, if I look at that next digit, it's a 1, so that's a 4 or smaller, so then I keep the 2 the same, so 43.2. And the reason we call it rounding down is I actually made that number a little bit smaller. This number here, 43.2, is a little bit smaller than 43.219 because the 19 right here makes the number a little bit bigger. So I rounded down, this number is a little smaller, even though the 2 stayed the same. All right, probably beat a dead horse with that. If we want to round up a 5 or higher, then you round up. And by that, I'm going to say make your number, or make the digit that you had picked before, 1 larger. And by that, we basically mean we are rounding up. Okay, so if I have this one, I have 43.219, I can make it 43.2. If I wanted to round it instead to this digit, so maybe I'll write it down below, 43.219. If I were to be rounding it to that spot, well then I look at the next number after the 1, and it's a 9. And because we have a 9 here, it's a 5 or higher, we're going to take and round this thing up. So I make it 43.22. So you could do this problem either way, depending on which digit you're rounding to. In one case, you'd have to round down like here. In the other case, you'd have to round up. Okay, if I pick this next number, and I'm going to do this one kind of a few different times. Let's say I'm rounding to this spot right there. Well, I'd make it 8.6. And then if we're rounding to that 4, that 100th spot, you look at the next number, which is the 5. Ooh, it's a 5 or higher, so I'm going to round it up. So my 4 has to become a 5. So that'd be one way to round the number. That'd be a correct way to do it. Let's say I'm going to instead round it to this digit. Well, if I'm doing that, then it'd be 8 point, well, do I leave it a 6, make it a 7? That next number right here is a 4. So since that number is a 4, I round down, or I just leave it a 6. So 8.6. Another way you could round it would be to round it to 9, because you have 8.6. If you were rounding it to this spot right there, the next number is a 6, so you'd round it up to a 9. So pick what place you're going to round to, and then that determines sometimes whether you round up or round down. A challenge, let's say we want to round 5.897 to the 100th spot. So there's going to be two things about this that are a little bit challenging. One, which one's the hundredths? So we have tenths, hundredths, so we're rounding it to this thing right there. Okay, well if I do that, I look at the next digit, which is my 7, and my 7 tells me I need to round up. Ooh, so I make the 9 a 10. And it's kind of like when you were doing the addition before and you run out of things in one column, you could carry the 1 to right there. So my 9 is going to become a 0. 8 plus 1 gives me 9. So I have 5.90 would be rounding to the hundredths. And because I'm going to that hundredth spot, I do have to have 2 digits. So you could say 5.90. All right, if you have questions on this stuff, ask in class, as always. So estimating. You can take and round numbers to compatible numbers and then do the math. So what's a compatible number? Compatible numbers says round to the nearest number that is easy to use. Hopefully it's easier to use than it was for me to write that, but easy to use. So if you have addition or multiplication, because those are typically making answers bigger, if you take and round one number up and round the other number down, then the increase in one is going to kind of cancel out the decrease in the other, and you'll get something that's closer. So if you do addition or multiplication, like these problems right here, see if it's convenient to round one up and one down. Okay, if we're doing subtraction and division, those, if you go the same direction, that tends to be best. So subtraction and division, if you can round them both, and maybe I'll add that word round in here, so round both in the same direction. So both down or both up. That's a good idea when possible. All right, so if I look at this first example, example 4, we're going to do this here. For division, I'm going to put a little 1 above this, because if you round that number first and then try to find something compatible with the second number, that's going to work better. So 84.7, I look at that and think that's really close to 85. So I wouldn't write this, but you could say 85. And now you're looking for what's a number over here that's close to 356 that's divisible by 85. But 85, like multiples of 85, I don't really know. So I'm going to take and actually round this a little bit more than that 85. And for that, I'm going to round it, well, I could either go to 80 or I could go to 90. 80 is a little bit closer. But if I'm looking at this number here and think like multiples of 80 or multiples of 8, so to speak, I'm not seeing any that really fit. But if I make this a 90, and this is where the math is going to be a little hard for some of you, and just do the best you can with this section. But I'm really looking at this part here and saying, what's a multiple of 9 that's close to that? And it's 36. You agree 9 goes into 36 4 times? So if I round 356.4 to 360, essentially this 0 and this 0 just both kind of cancel out. But I don't know if that'll make sense to people. So let me erase those a second and put my zeros back in. But 360 divided by 90 is the same as 36 divided by 9, which then gives 4. So that probably was a little bit rough. If so and it's not making sense, do what you can when you get to something like this in the homework. Maybe flag down a teacher or a friend and let's work through some of these together. Okay, so that was division. It was nice to both go down or both go up. And now we have the addition one next in example 5. And in example 5, because it's addition multiplication, we can round 1 up and round 1 down. That's going to work out pretty nicely. So I look at this one here in 14.779. Well, that's real close to 15. So I'm going to round that to 15. And I rounded up. Well, if I round this one down, that works out really quite nice. And this, the amount that I dropped here is about the same as the amount that I had to increase there to get those to cancel out. So 15 plus 20. 15 plus 20 then gives me a nice 35. So the answer would be 35. And you don't have to do this by any stretch, but if you were to take and round it differently, you know, maybe you looked at that and thought, oh, I don't need to round it that much. I'm just going to take this right here and make it 14.75. And then this right here is real close to 20.25. So I only rounded by like 1/100th here and a little over, a little less than 3/100ths here. If you take and add those same things together, you still get that same 35. But in this case, it's fine to just do like to the nearest whole number as well. Okay, for next one is multiplication. So that puts us up here in this category as well. If you can do 1 up and 1 down, that's a good idea. So when I look at these, I could round that, could round that down to 23, but 23 is not going to be real easy to multiply. Could round that up to 38, but 23 times 38, but if I round down further, like 20 is a nice pretty number. So I dropped about 3 there. And if I take this one here, I go up 2.5-ish. So down 3, up 2.5. Those are going to somewhat cancel each other out. So I'm going to make that a 40. The other option, I suppose, would be to round this up to 25 and round this down to 35, but even that's hard to multiply. But 20 times 40, that's just going to be 600. The 2 times the, messed that up. Scratch that. Okay, that's going to be 800, because the 2 times the 4 gives me 8, and then 0 and 0 there. Each of those is just multiplying by 10 each time, so it'd be 800. If I lost you, you could real easily go over on this side and do all right. So I have zeros for this thing, and then for zeros for this one. And then when you do 2 times 0, that gives you 0. And then you have the 2 times the 4, gives me an 8. So, okay, last one. So if we're doing division, like I said above, it's good to start with this number here. So I look at 68.93, and I'm going to round that to 70. That's just way closer than 60 is, so I'm going to start with 70 there. And sometimes if you have like a really big number divided by 70, that's kind of hard. But really we're looking for multiples of 7. And if we're kind of dropping the 0 here, it's kind of like dropping the 10s there and saying, what do I have here that's a multiple of 7? Well, I have 28, so that's going to be off by about 3, between 28 and 31. Or I have 35, which is kind of off by, well, this is pretty much a 2 with a 9 behind it. That's only off by 3. So you really could go through, I suppose, and do either one. So maybe let's just stick both answers in there. So I think I give you credit for both ones. I'm going to round this 319 to 350. And 350 divided by 70 will give you the same answer as 35 divided by 7, which is going to be 5. The other option, like I started saying before, is, well, 280. So if you're happy with the 5, leave the 5. The other option is maybe you would have rounded 319 down to 280. When you divide that by 70, that's going to be the same as 28 divided by 7, which gives you 4. So this isn't the world's best example by any stretch. If you punch it in, I think the answer is right around 4.6 actually. So that's where it's yeah. If you had one where this number here was a lot closer to like a 5, then it should be more natural to round there. But one right in the middle, you have some options on the quiz or the test. That's all I have for you. Let me know if you get stuck. Thanks for watching all the way to the end.